What if a 6-year-old child's honesty could change the life of a billionaire and bring down a man who thought he could get away with anything? This is the story of courage, integrity, and justice that proves sometimes the smallest hands can move the biggest hearts. If this is your first time watching one of our videos, we'd love you to subscribe to our channel. Your support means the world, and it helps us bring you even more interesting stories. Atlanta was quiet that night. The skyscrapers, usually filled with voices, footsteps, and ringing telephones, stood in silence, their lights blinking like sleepy eyes. Inside one of the tallest towers, Robert Hayes sat alone in his office. The room was grand. Mahogany shelves lined with books, a wide glass window showing the city lights, and in the corner, a massive steel safe that had guarded his wealth for years. But tonight, Robert had done something strange. The door of the safe was wide open, and inside lay piles upon piles of cash. More money than most people would see in a lifetime. The bills were stacked, but not neatly. They looked like a storm had blown through them. Robert leaned back in his leather chair, his head tilted slightly to the side, pretending to sleep. His breaths were steady, his body perfectly still. But his eyes, half closed, watched every corner of the room. He was waiting. This was no accident. Robert had planned this moment carefully. You see, Robert Hayes was a billionaire. At 46, he had built an empire in real estate, technology, and logistics. People admired him, envied him, even feared him. But Robert had learned the hard way that wealth did not guarantee loyalty. Just 6 months earlier, his closest business partner had stolen $3 million from him, disappearing overnight and leaving Robert's heart bruised with betrayal. Since then, he asked himself one haunting question. Was there anyone left in this world who was truly honest? Tonight, he would find out. The test was simple. Leave the safe open with a fortune inside and see what happens when temptation whispers. The door opened quietly, and 2 figures stepped inside. Naomi Carter, 32 years old, carried her cleaning supplies with tired arms. She had worked at Robert's company for 2 years, always on the night shift, always quiet, always thorough. Her uniform was simple, her shoes worn out, but her back remained straight, her spirit unbroken. Walking beside her was her daughter, little Amara, only 6 years old, with brown skin, bright curious eyes, and tiny pink gloves that looked almost too cute for the dark, serious office space. Those gloves had a story. Naomi had bought them at a discount store last Christmas. A small gift to make Amara feel useful whenever she accompanied her mother to work during school breaks. To Naomi, they were just gloves. To Amara, they were a symbol. "I'm helping Mommy." As they entered, Naomi whispered gently, "Stay close, sweetheart. I'll be quick." "Yes, Mommy," Amara replied, her voice soft like the hum of a lullaby. Naomi began dusting the tall shelves, humming quietly to herself, trying to ignore her exhaustion. Amara wandered, her little footsteps making soft taps against the polished wooden floor. And then she saw it. The safe! Her eyes widened. Inside was a mountain of money. More bills than she had ever seen in all her short years. The green notes seemed to glow under the office light. For a moment, Amara just stood there, her mouth slightly open, like she was staring at a treasure chest from a fairy tale. Robert's heart tightened. He had seen that look before. Grown men, powerful women, greedy employees. All of them unable to resist. His breath slowed. This is it, he thought. This child will reach out. And I'll learn that honesty is nothing but a myth. But what happened next froze him. Amara did not take the money. Instead, she tilted her head, frowned a little, and whispered to herself, "It's messy." She stepped closer to the safe, reached out her tiny hands, and with the seriousness of a little accountant, began to arrange the money. She stacked the bills carefully, separating them into neat piles. Tens with tens, 20s with 20s, hundreds with hundreds. Her gloves made soft, shuffling sounds as she worked. She handled each note as if it were something sacred, fragile. Something not hers but still deserving of respect. Robert almost forgot to breathe. From across the room, Naomi turned suddenly. Her heart stopped when she saw her daughter near the open safe. "Amara!" she hissed, rushing over. "You mustn't touch that." "But Mommy," Amara said, her innocent eyes wide. "It was all messy. I only wanted to tidy it up, like you taught me with our coins at home." Naomi's hands trembled as she pulled her daughter back. "Sweetheart, you can't touch the boss's things. Not even to fix them. People might think—" She stopped, her voice breaking with fear. She couldn't even finish the thought. Amara's face fell, her brows knitting. "I wasn't taking it, Mommy. I was helping. Maybe he'll be happy when he sees it tidy." Naomi's throat tightened. She hugged her daughter, whispering, "Oh, my love, I know your heart is pure. But in this world, people don't always see it that way." In his chair, Robert felt something stir deep inside him. His throat burned, and for the first time in years, tears pricked his eyes. This child, this little girl who probably never held more than $20 in her life, had touched a fortune and never thought of stealing. Instead, she had only thought of helping, of making something better. And more than that, she confessed it openly to her mother, without shame, without fear, because she had nothing to hide. Robert Hayes, the billionaire who had lost his faith in humanity, suddenly felt something he hadn't in years: hope. He stayed silent, not wanting to reveal himself just yet. But inside, his heart whispered, "This child, this little girl has shown me more honesty than all the powerful men I've known." What Robert didn't know, what he could not yet imagine, was that this small act of purity from a 6-year-old girl was about to change everything. It would set off a chain of events that would expose hidden prejudices, challenge the arrogance of the powerful, and rebuild his shattered faith in ways he could never have predicted. And so, as Naomi finished her cleaning and gently led Amara out of the office, Robert leaned back in his chair, tears drying in his eyes. For the first time in many years, the billionaire whispered into the empty room, "Maybe, just maybe, there are still good people left in this world." But he had no idea that this was just the beginning of a storm. Weeks passed since that fateful night in Robert Hayes' office. The memory of little Amara arranging the stacks of money stayed with him like a quiet, persistent echo. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw the seriousness on her tiny face, her little hands carefully stacking the bills, and he felt something stir in his heart, a sense of faith he hadn't felt in years. But life outside that office, in the quiet hours of the night, was far from simple. Naomi Carter and Amara continued their routine. Naomi worked tirelessly, often taking the night shift at Robert's company, and then moving on to a cleaning job at a local doctor's office in the mornings. She never complained, never asked for favors, and always treated Amara with warmth and love, teaching her not only how to be kind, but how to survive with dignity. Amara was a bright child. She did her homework quietly in the waiting room at the doctor's office, sometimes playing with a small set of colored pencils, occasionally looking up with eyes that seemed to see far more than anyone expected. And she remembered every lesson her mother taught her. "We always return what isn't ours, even if no one is watching," Naomi said one evening, holding Amara's tiny hands. "Our honesty is worth more than any money in the world." It was a simple lesson, but in a world that had already begun to feel unfair to the little girl, it was a treasure. Robert watched them discreetly, not with cameras, at least not yet, but with a growing curiosity and admiration. He learned of Naomi's double shifts, her sacrifices, her dedication. He began quietly increasing her salary, instructing the HR department to justify it as a category adjustment. It was small, silent gratitude for work well done, and a subtle acknowledgement of the values Naomi instilled in her daughter. But not everyone was blind to this change. Gregory Steele, The company's vice president of operations noticed the financial adjustments immediately. 50 years old, with a sharp suit and sharper tongue, he was a man accustomed to inherited privilege. To him, money meant power, and power meant superiority. And he did not see Naomi or Amara as equals. "Robert, why are we wasting money on cleaning staff? Especially her?" Gregory said one afternoon during a board meeting. His voice carried a thinly veiled contempt. Naomi's name had barely been spoken in such a setting before. Robert's jaw tightened. "She is excellent," Robert replied simply. Gregory laughed, dismissive and scornful. "Excellent? She's cleaning floors. Let me understand this. We give her extra money for what? Making the office smell nice? A child in the workplace is hardly professional. People like her don't belong here. Give them an extra coin, and soon they'll be asking for the vault." Robert's hands tightened into fists beneath the table. He kept his voice calm. "She's honest. She works hard. That is all that matters." Gregory's eyes narrowed. "It's not just the pay, Robert. It's the child. That girl shouldn't even be here. What kind of mother exposes her child to a corporate environment? Clearly, her home life isn't proper. It's inappropriate, and you're encouraging it." That evening, Robert watched everything unfold through the office security cameras. Gregory had cornered Naomi in a hallway, his presence heavy, his words venomous. "Listen carefully," he said, his voice low and threatening. "I know you're getting more money than you deserve. I don't know what kind of favors you're doing, but it stops tonight. And get that child out of here. This isn't a daycare center." Naomi stood her ground, though her face was pale. Amara clutched her mother's skirt, frightened. "Sir," Naomi replied firmly, "I am just doing my job. I follow the rules. Nothing more, nothing less." Robert felt a cold fury rising inside him. For years, he had tolerated wrongs. He had buried anger under polite smiles. But this was different. Gregory had crossed a line. Not only had he insulted Naomi, but he had frightened an innocent child. That night, Robert decided he would no longer be a passive observer. He began to plan. First, he recorded everything, every word, every sneer, every malicious glance. Gregory did not know that the cameras, the microphones he himself had authorized, were capturing his abuses. But Robert wanted more than just recordings. He wanted a decisive, undeniable way to ensure justice would be served. He contacted Marcus Chun, a former FBI investigator and expert in corporate affairs. Robert had worked with Marcus during the embezzlement case months earlier. "Marcus," Robert said over the phone, his voice steady, "I need your help again." "What kind of trouble now?" Marcus asked, intrigued. "This involves abuse of power, institutional prejudice, and harassment," Robert explained. "I need solid evidence against Gregory Steele. Everything. Phone calls, emails, threats, plans to harm Naomi and her daughter. I want a complete record." Marcus chuckled knowingly. "That man? He's reckless. This will be easier than taking candy from a baby." Meanwhile, Gregory intensified his psychological campaign against Naomi. He began filing fabricated reports to HR, claiming she was consistently late and that bringing her child disrupted office operations. Sandra Miller, the HR director, a competent woman in her 40s, began to suspect foul play. "Mr. Steele, I will need to verify these claims," she said cautiously. "I am the vice president," Gregory said arrogantly. "My word should be enough." Robert watched quietly. Every lie, every attempt to manipulate, every effort to intimidate was being captured. Gregory's arrogance, his bigotry, and his entitlement became his own undoing, layer by layer. The situation escalated further when Gregory intercepted Naomi and Amara in the parking lot one night. Blocking her way, he sneered, "I know you're doing more than cleaning to earn that extra money. What kind of special services are you providing? Naomi stood tall despite her fear. Amara whispered behind her. Mommy, why is he being mean? Some adults, Naomi said softly, try to make others unhappy because they are unhappy themselves. Don't worry, my love. It is their problem, not ours. Robert watched with a cold, calculating rage. Gregory's behavior revealed everything. Prejudice, cruelty, arrogance. Each act only strengthened Robert's resolve. This was not just about Naomi and Amara. It was about exposing a pattern, confronting injustice, and setting things right. He began implementing phase 2 of his plan. Extra microphones were installed, discreetly capturing Gregory's threats and conspiracies. Every cruel word, every attempt to fabricate evidence was recorded. Gregory did not know he was walking into a meticulously planned trap. By the end of the week, Robert had amassed enough proof to show not only Gregory's harassment and discrimination, but also his conspiracy to frame Naomi. It was a fortress of truth, built patiently, carefully, and silently. As Robert watched Amara coloring quietly while her mother worked, he realized something profound. The honesty of a 6-year-old, the resilience of a single mother, and the courage to stand against injustice were forces stronger than any corporate title, any fortune, or any inherited privilege. And in the shadows of prejudice, he was preparing to bring light. The office was quiet that evening, but the stillness was deceptive. Every corner, every desk, every hallway had been carefully observed for weeks. Robert Hayes sat in his leather chair, a calm mask on his face, but inside, his mind was alive with anticipation. He had spent days preparing, and now it was time. Gregory Steele, the arrogant vice president, believed he was untouchable. Privilege had always protected him, and he wore it like armor. He had no idea that every plan, every malicious act, every threat he had uttered against Naomi Carter and little Amara had been meticulously recorded. Earlier that day, Gregory had gone to great lengths to plant evidence against Naomi. A brand new, expensive Rolex watch had mysteriously found its way into her cleaning cart. He smirked to himself, imagining the outrage and humiliation that would follow. 15 minutes, he muttered, glancing at his watch. 15 minutes, and she's finished. What he didn't know was that Robert was watching, not just from the office above, but through high-resolution monitors, with every camera angle covered, including some that Gregory had never even suspected existed. Marcus Chun, the former FBI investigator, was positioned strategically outside, along with a van full of recording equipment. Discreet journalists waited nearby, ready to document the unfolding moment. Gregory descended to the office floor, accompanied by 2 security guards, his confidence unshaken. "Mrs. Carter," he said in a false, polite tone, "I need to check your cleaning supplies. Reports of missing items have reached HR." Naomi froze, confused and frightened. Amara hugged her leg tightly, eyes wide with worry. "Mommy, what's happening?" she whispered. "It's okay, baby," Naomi replied quietly, trying to steady her voice. "Just stay calm." Gregory strode directly to the cart, theatrically removing the Rolex watch. What do we have here?" His voice carried a smug triumph, as if he had uncovered a criminal mastermind. Naomi's face went pale. "I've never seen this watch before," she stammered. Gregory's smirk widened. "Of course not. It just appeared in your cart, didn't it?" Amara stood behind her mother, trembling. Gregory barked at her to be quiet, dismissing the child as if her fear were irrelevant. He couldn't notice, that every word, every action, was being captured, recorded, and catalogued. Robert finally appeared, stepping into the office with a quiet confidence that froze Gregory in place. Behind him were Marcus and 3 other individuals Gregory did not recognize. "I think you should hang up that phone," Robert said, his tone calm, deliberate, almost chilling. What is this?" Gregory demanded, his smirk faltering. My watch? Robert asked lightly, a hint of amusement in his voice. I've been wearing the same Apple Watch for 5 years. I've never owned a Rolex. The confidence drained from Gregory's face. He looked at the monitors, the cameras, and the people surrounding him, beginning to understand that his plan had backfired spectacularly. Marcus stepped forward, holding a tablet. Angle 1, he said, swiping to the first high-definition video. Angle 2. Angle 3. Here's your face clearly visible as you planted the watch in Mrs. Carter's cart. Gregory's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. He was speechless. Oh, but there's so much more, Robert continued. Marcus, show him the scrapbook. The digital file projected screenshots of private social media posts, messages, and incriminating conversations. Gregory's racist remarks, his scheming to fabricate evidence, his discussions with his father about creating legal difficulties, all laid bare. Need to keep those people in their place, Marcus read aloud. Only way to handle them is to show them who's boss from the start. Naomi gasped, covering her mouth. Amara clutched her mother's skirt. Gregory tried to step closer to the screen, but Robert blocked him effortlessly. Where did you get this? Gregory demanded, sweat beading on his forehead. Security system you approved yourself, Robert said simply. Everything, from the calls to the cameras, every microphone, your words, your actions, all captured. Every threat, every lie, every plan. One of the journalists stepped forward. Mr. Steele, would you like to comment on this evidence of systematic racial discrimination and conspiracy to fabricate criminal evidence? Gregory's face turned red, then pale. He opened his mouth, but no words came. The weight of reality crashed down on him. The police were already en route, and his empire of privilege was crumbling before his eyes. Not just by the police, Robert said, but also by the press, the company board, and your employees' legal team. Marcus continued methodically. We have documented 15 years of harassment, 3 lawsuits hushed by your family's influence, multiple victims across your career, and the proof of the plot against Mrs. Carter you executed tonight. Gregory's arrogance dissolved entirely. He was no longer a vice president. He was a man exposed. Thomas, Amara whispered, holding her mother's hand tightly. Amara, Robert corrected gently, kneeling to her level. He will never bother you or your mother again. You are safe now. Gregory made a final, desperate attempt to salvage his dignity. We can settle this between gentlemen. My family has significant investments in this company. Had, Robert replied sharply, the word echoing like a verdict. Until 20 minutes ago, when the board voted unanimously to force the purchase of all Steele family shares. Your fortune is gone, along with your career. Moments later, the police arrived. Gregory Steele was handcuffed, his face a mask of disbelief and anger. Detective Harris read him his rights, while journalists recorded every reaction, every expression. Naomi and Amara stood together, finally free from fear. Naomi's eyes met Robert's, gratitude shining through her tears. Mr. Hayes, she said softly, did you know this would happen? I suspected, Robert replied. But it was your courage and your honesty that made the truth undeniable. Amara looked up at him. Mr. Hayes, will the bad man stop scaring Mommy now? Robert smiled, kneeling again. Yes, sweetheart. Never again. That night marked a turning point. Gregory Steele, who had relied on arrogance, privilege, and cruelty, fell completely. His wife filed for divorce, his children disowned him, and no reputable company would hire him. Meanwhile, Naomi and Amara's lives were transformed forever. 6 months later, Naomi became director of human resources at Robert's company, a position created especially to recognize her skills, dedication, and the dignity with which she had faced injustice. Amara thrived, attending the best school in town and dreaming of becoming a lawyer to help others who faced unfair treatment. Robert's company became a model of inclusion and diversity, a symbol of what could happen when integrity, courage, and vigilance combined. The Jasmine Carter Scholarship Fund was later established in Amara's name, ensuring that hundreds of children would have access to education, opportunities, and the chance to shine. In the end, Gregory Steele's fall became a legend, a cautionary tale in corporate circles about the dangers of underestimating the power of honesty, courage, and moral strength. And in the quiet office where it all began, Robert often thought of the little girl who had started it all, the 6-year-old who taught a billionaire that integrity could never be bought, that kindness could never be silenced, and that sometimes the smallest hands could change the world. The morning sun streamed through the glass walls of Hayes Enterprises, casting a golden glow on a company forever changed. The corridors were alive with a quiet excitement, a sense of renewal, and a newfound respect among employees. Robert Hayes walked through the offices, observing not only the efficiency of his team, but the dignity and pride radiating from every corner. Naomi Carter moved gracefully through the hallways, no longer burdened by fear or injustice. Her new position as Director of Human Resources had been created specially for her after Robert discovered her business degree that she had never been able to complete. She had been given not just recognition, but empowerment, and she intended to use it to ensure that no employee would ever face the same threats she had endured. Amara, now 7, skipped happily beside her mother as they entered the office that had become her second home. "Mommy, can I show Mr. Hayes my new drawing?" she asked, her voice bubbling with excitement. Naomi smiled, pride shining in her eyes. "Of course, sweetie," she said. Robert bent down to Amara's level, smiling warmly. "Let's see it, Amara." The little girl proudly held out her drawing, a colorful depiction of a sun shining over a group of people holding hands. At the center was a small figure with a crown of honesty, a clear nod to her mother's courage. Robert's eyes glistened with tears. In that moment, he realized that the actions of one small child had created ripples far beyond her understanding. Across town, the news was already buzzing. The story of Gregory Steele's disgrace had gone viral. Corporate boards, journalists, and social media outlets dissected every detail. A man who had once wielded power with cruelty and arrogance was now reduced to a cautionary tale. His wealth had evaporated, his reputation destroyed, and his own family had distanced themselves from him. Every attempt he made to salvage his life was met with reminders of the evidence that had exposed his actions. Meanwhile, back at Hayes Enterprises, Robert had begun implementing the Fair Chance Initiative, a program designed to ensure inclusion, diversity, and opportunity for all employees, especially those historically overlooked. Naomi oversaw its launch, her first act being the creation of a scholarship fund for the children of employees, with Amara being the first beneficiary. Robert watched as Naomi explained the program to her team, her confidence and warmth filling the room. He remembered the little girl who had once carefully stacked his money, untouched by greed, guided only by honesty and a sense of order. That child had taught him more about trust, integrity, and humanity than any boardroom lesson ever could. The months that followed were transformative. Employees who had felt invisible now felt seen, valued, and respected. The company's culture shifted from one of competition and suspicion to collaboration and support. Recognition programs, mentorship, and clear paths for advancement were implemented, creating opportunities for all, regardless of background. Amara thrived alongside this transformation. She attended the best private school in the city, her curiosity and intelligence nurtured by both her mother and Robert's guidance. She dreamed of becoming a lawyer, inspired by the way her mother had stood up for what was right and how Robert had ensured justice was served. Her drawings often included scenes of fairness, equality, and heroes who protected the innocent. Robert sometimes reflected quietly on the long journey, the embezzlement he had suffered years ago, the betrayal by trusted partners, and the loss of faith in humanity had all seemed insurmountable. Yet, through observing the honesty and courage of a 6-year-old and her mother, he had discovered a path not just to justice, but to genuine transformation, for himself, his company, and his community. Gregory Steele, in contrast, lived a very different reality. After serving 18 months in prison for conspiracy, harassment, and discrimination, he was released to find a world that had moved on without him. Former colleagues ignored his calls. His children had changed their last name and refused contact. His wife divorced him, taking half of their remaining assets. Any attempt to rebuild his career was blocked by the evidence of his misconduct, which continued to circulate online, haunting him like a permanent shadow. In stark contrast, the lives of Naomi and Amara flourished. Naomi's leadership became nationally recognized. She implemented innovative HR strategies, advocated for employee rights, and mentored others who faced systemic barriers. Her work earned awards, and her story became an example in corporate ethics programs across the country. Amara's education became a beacon of hope. With the scholarship fund bearing her name, dozens of children received opportunities they would never have imagined. They excelled in school, pursued careers in law, medicine, business, and technology, and carried forward the lessons of honesty, integrity, and courage that Amara had embodied since the age of 6. On Amara's 10th birthday, Robert organized a special celebration that doubled as an announcement. Friends, employees, and journalists gathered in the office-turned-celebration hall. Candles flickered, laughter echoed, and the air was filled with joy. "Amara," Robert said, taking the stage, "you and your mother have changed my life in ways I can never fully repay. Today, I am proud to announce the creation of the Amara Carter Educational Fund. This fund will provide college scholarships to talented young black students for the next 50 years. Amara's eyes sparkled with wonder. She ran to hug Robert, her small arms wrapped tightly around him. "Thank you for believing in us when no one else did," she whispered. Robert smiled through tears. "No, sweetheart. The real heroes are the ones who had the courage to do what's right, even when it was difficult." That courage built this legacy. At the same time, Gregory Steele struggled to find employment, even at a local gas station. Any potential employer who researched him discovered the story that had become a nationwide case study. A man who had let arrogance, prejudice, and cruelty destroy not only his career but his family's fortune. His fall was complete, public, and irrevocable. Robert often spoke about the lesson learned from this extraordinary series of events. "True justice," he said during a keynote at Harvard University, "is not about vengeance. It's about building something greater than the harm you've witnessed. Integrity, when protected by courage and action, creates legacies that inspire generations." Gregory Steele tried to bring us down, but he ended up lifting us higher than we ever imagined. Years later, Amara continued to excel academically and personally. She attended a prep school destined for Harvard, her mind sharpened by curiosity and guided by the moral compass her mother had instilled in her. Naomi earned her MBA and became nationally recognized for her innovations in human resources and corporate justice programs. Robert Hayes received governmental honors for his contributions to corporate diversity and equality, cementing the legacy they had all built together. And in the quiet moments of reflection, Robert often thought back to the day it all began. The 6-year-old child who had approached the table, curious and honest, who had not touched a single dollar, but had arranged piles of cash with care and integrity. That small act, pure and sincere, had set in motion a chain of events that changed lives, corrected injustices, and proved that sometimes the smallest hands could move the largest hearts. The story of Amara, Naomi, and Robert became more than just an anecdote. It became a symbol of hope, justice, and the extraordinary power of integrity. A story that reminded the world that doing good, even when it seems impossible, always has a ripple effect far beyond what one can see. The office, once a place of tension and fear, now echoed with laughter, learning, and opportunity. The legacy of fairness and courage lived in every scholarship granted, every child inspired, every employee protected. And somewhere in the hearts of those who witnessed it all, the memory of a small, honest girl remained. A reminder that the greatest changes often begin with the simplest, purest acts of integrity.